it was actually dangerous for journalists to have a personal brand.
Broadcasting from Boston, Massachusetts, you're listening to the Technology Equals Equality podcast.
Welcome back, Techie community. Thank you so much for joining me here for our very first episode of 2018. I'm your host, Lori Brooks, and this is episode 74. Please join me in welcoming our very first guest of this year, Elena Newtile, managing editor of OnlyInYourState.com, one of the nation's leading travel and culture sites with nearly 9 million Facebook fans and 35 million monthly visits. After graduating from Kalamazoo College with honors and a determination to use her English degree, Elena cut her teeth in digital journalism at Cleveland Science Magazine and Detroit Metro Times, quadrupling their web traffic in the process. Elena now manages a team of over 70 writers and editors and oversees all digital and social content for OnlyInYourState.com. In her spare time, Elena enjoys hiking, trying new restaurants, and checking out her own backyard in Denver, Colorado, where she currently lives with her husband, Nick. Listen in as Elena and I dive into her internal entrepreneurial journey this month as we highlight female entrepreneurs. Elena, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So before we dive into your entrepreneurial journey, we'd love to rewind the clock just a little bit. Have you tell us a story about what you thought life might be like when you became an adult, when you left school? What did you think was out there for you in the future?
That's a great question. I mean, I've always had kind of this entrepreneurial spirit. As a kid, I always was starting kind of these little businesses and just was like this little worker bee. Every summer I'd kind of put on these lemonade stands and yard sales. But one business in particular that I remember creating, and gosh, I must have been 5 or 6 years old at this point, was my pine cone business. And essentially, I would go around to all of my neighbors' houses and ask if I could pick up these pine cones in their front yard, and they would always oblige. Only to discover that I would go home, decorate the pine cones with glitter and paint, and come back and sell those pine cones to the same neighbors that I had originally collected them from for 10 cents a pop. So as a little kid, toting around all my pine cones, this is kind of like looking back, it was kind of brilliant. I mean, like what neighbor is going to say no? And I always ended up having a little bit of cash in my pocket as a result. So, these kinds of entrepreneurial tendencies really followed me throughout high school and into college. I always had the dream to, once I graduated from college, to go on and work in the journalism field. And eventually, one day, hopefully create my own company. I'm not there yet, definitely, but kind of down the road, that is something I would love to one day do.
You're well on your way in that direction. Fast forward just a little bit to when you were in school. What were you studying? What did you think you would have as a career later on? Because I'm pretty sure you weren't studying pine cones at that point.
No, I had moved on from that, thank goodness. But I attended Kalamazoo College, which is a small liberal arts school in Southwest Michigan. I double majored in Spanish and English. And being such a small school, I think there are like 1,500 undergraduate students total in the entire institution, very small. They didn't have a designated journalism program per se. So I was able to get my journalism training through experiential learning. At Kalamazoo College, they offer tons of support in this area. So by the time I graduated, I actually had 4 internships under my belt, including a stint at Business Insider, which since that time has grown tremendously, internationally even. But during my internship there, it was essentially like a crash course in digital journalism. It was probably one of the most important things I did during my undergraduate career, and truly helped me prepare for life after college. I was able to take my experiences at Business Insider, apply them to my senior thesis, And then really from there, it kind of propelled me into the next few years of my career. I went from Kalamazoo College to an alternative weekly magazine in Cleveland, Ohio, where I served as the web editor for about 2.5 years. And then I ended up finding Only in Your State, or rather Only in Your State found me in 2015 through a colleague at this alternative weekly who introduced me to one of Only in Your State's founders. And we jived immediately and found that we kind of had the same kind of vision and thirst and ambition for web projects. And at that point, I was brought on as a managing editor in January of 2016 and have been there ever since. As a college student, it was kind of my dream job to one day be a managing editor at a web company, digital publication, and just oversee kind of the entire editorial process. And, here just a few years later, I'm living that dream.
That's awesome. I love how you went from this pinecone business as a kid, really kind of testing the waters as an entrepreneur, to getting into school and kind of really formulating your own thought processes as to what it is you saw yourself doing in terms of journalism being your interest. I'm curious as to Spanish being your double major and how that came about and why you chose to make the pivot towards journalism, or was it simply because of the fact that Kalamazoo didn't have journalism as the double major, as something that you could major in, that you chose to do the language in order to just kind of contribute to the journalism studies while you did the internships?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my double major in Spanish was actually kind of by default. After high school, I took a gap year and went and lived in Spain for a year. So
Nice.
Coming off of that year abroad, I tested really high into, the Spanish level. And I think I was like halfway done with the major before even going into my sophomore year. So
Wow.
It kind of was just in addition to. But I did have the opportunity to study abroad a second time in Ecuador during college. And during that time, I was able to intern at a newspaper in Ecuador called La Hora. And that was a really great experience to see how a newsroom in a Latin American country operated, especially having done several internships here in the U.S., just to kind of see the differences, the nuances, and kind of really wet my feet in both countries there. So that was also an incredibly valuable experience. There's still things today that, I've taken away from that stint in Ecuador that I can apply day to day, whether that's social media or just kind of how to manage people. So there were a lot of really positive experiences about that.
I can imagine. I mean, when you have the opportunity to go abroad just on a trip in general for a vacation, it's an experience that you enjoy. But having the opportunity to do an internship abroad is something that kind of opens your eyes in ways that the other experiences may not have the ability to. It's not something that you've kept in your journey as a major playing piece, but I understand that it was kind of a default to what it was you were really looking to do. I think it's awesome the amount of opportunities you took upon yourself in terms of the internships and the ability to pivot and kind of maneuver through different agencies per se with the internships to gain that insight into how each area was conducted. What did you find to be the biggest difference there between the way the magazines or internet-based publications were managed here in the U.S. versus there when you were in Ecuador or with La Hora?
One striking difference that I specifically remember is that here in the United States, journalists are very aware of their personal brand. They're trying to build it up. They're trying to get as many stories underneath their byline as possible. They want to make themselves as visible as possible. In Ecuador, at least during the time when I was there, it was back in 2011, the personal brand was played down substantially. In fact, it was actually dangerous for journalists to have a personal brand. And when we would publish an article at La Hora, we were specifically denied a byline. So the publication would publish all of the articles under the umbrella of La Hora and basically take any kind of identifying features away from the journalists themselves. And this was really for their protection, just because, it was a very kind of unstable political climate during that time. And, they didn't want any journalists to be targeted or anything like that. So they would tend to basically just kind of lump us all together under the brand of publication. So that's one of the biggest things. Now, especially today, in today's climate here in the U.S., each and every journalist is trying to promote themselves, their brand, their own identity within the publication itself. That was definitely one of the biggest differences that I noticed.
Interesting. What did you find to be the most difficult of this journey thus far? When you were in Ecuador, or when you did the gap year, when you took on the internships, did you find that there was one piece of the internships or during your schooling that you feel was more difficult than the remainder, and why do you feel that way?
That's a really good question. So, yeah, I guess I would say that kind of each piece of the journey, I mean, especially at such a young age, you're basically like a sponge, just absorbing everything that you possibly can, relying heavily on your editor or your editors for guidance and support. Now I've graduated into the role of the managing editor, not only in your state, and basically oversee all day-to-day editorial operations. But of course, being in this position has come with its own set of challenges and difficulties. I remember that when I started, one of the things that was a big adjustment for me was going from working in an actual brick and mortar office with coworkers who sat 2 feet away, at my position at the Alternative Weekly in Cleveland, to a completely remote virtual system that we have it only in your state today. So our entire team of 78 works exclusively from home. And as a manager overseeing a virtual community, I've had to learn to connect with my staff on a different level and keep them energized and engaged. We have a variety of platforms to interact on a day-to-day basis. Email, of course, Skype, we've used Slack, and then certainly Facebook. We've taken advantage of Facebook's private groups to have like ongoing conversations throughout the day, both serious in nature, like we'll discuss topics and pitches on Facebook, but we also use it as a place to have fun. So our Facebook groups have kind of become like a virtual water cooler of sorts, and really have allowed us to get to know each other on a personal level. I mean, we'll share stories and things that have happened to us in the day, and we'll complain about a commenter that's giving us a hard time or something like that. So it's actually a lot of fun.
I love that.
And I think the biggest thing that any manager can do, whether you're working in an actual office or whether you're remote like we are, is really just to treat your employees well and treat them like human beings. And, we try to be very transparent with our staff. We celebrate our successes. We share our failures. We reward achievement. And at the end of the day, we recognize that we're all working toward a variety of common goals. And we just want to try to nurture the employees so that they can help us meet those goals in any way that they can.
I love how focused you are on managing the team itself when it comes to it being, completely virtual. That's something that I don't think many people have taken on at all. You've taken on a team of, I believe you have 47 writers, is that correct?
We have 78. So we have writers in all 50 states and 25 cities now. So our entire staff is about 78 in total.
Really impressive, first of all, Elena. That's really impressive that you're capable of keeping that morale and the teamwork and interest amongst your employees up, despite the fact that it's entirely virtual. I can't even imagine how difficult that might be. Your virtual water cooler is probably the funniest thing I've ever heard, and I think it's something that you should start suggesting, and something that I will be suggesting to small business owners globally. New use for your Facebook group. Use it as your virtual water cooler for your teams, because, in fact, when we first started this call, before we actually got into the recording this episode, we were touching base on one of my previous guests whose biggest issue was working with his teams, which are remote, and they're remote globally. So not just here in the U.S., but kind of, his production team and so forth. And so we were talking about the different platforms that would help him communicate with them and what, kind of real-time issues he was having with those communications and different products that would be, helpful there. But I think what you've done is you've taken it a step further in terms of not just communication in work, in the work manner, but communication in terms of the morale in an office space that doesn't even exist. So, yeah, I think that's really awesome. What do you feel was the key to your ability to get this far in your career, to, findonlyinyourstate.com? Of course, that was, a connection that was made. But what do you feel was kind of the driving force behind your journey? Do you feel like it was, maintaining organization with the different internships that you were working on and the connections that you were making, or do you feel like it was kind of maintaining a positive mindset and pushing yourself forward on the journey? What do you feel like really helped you the most?
Yeah, I think, one of the biggest factors here is maintaining organization. I'm a very routine-oriented person. So usually when I tell people I work from home, the first thing I get is, oh, I could never work from home. I would just watch Netflix all day. But for me, like that's not even an option. I'm one of those people who gets up at the same time every day, has the same kind of routine. I've basically found in my day-to-day my most productive times, and I try to maximize that to the best of my ability. So I'm like a morning person. I get like so much of my work done between 6 and 10 a.m. And then I kind of take that mental break and, I'll go to the gym or I'll go grocery shopping and just step away for that, and that hour period. And then when I come back, I can kind of refocus, dive right back into what I was doing before. So having kind of that overall organization, having that routine, identifying, and then just really trying to nurture and cultivate that's, I think, what has made such a difference for me personally.
One of the things that I actually go through in the second pillar of the program that I work on with my clients is really figuring out how to block out the time and maximize the productivity during that time. That's one of the quickest ways to increase revenue in any business. So the fact that you do that for yourself as managing editor is awesome, because that's why you are who you are, Elena. That's definitely 100%, how you're getting to where you're getting to. What would you suggest to other women who are thinking about kind of an upper level management role, but are nervous or scared or a little more hesitant to enter what seems to still be predominantly male-dominated land? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. What would you suggest to other women?
Yeah, so for me personally, the two biggest things that have made a difference are really working hard and knowing my worth. So when I was about to graduate from college, I was in the fortunate position of having to decide between two different job offers. One was at an internship at a company that I only kind of wanted to work for, but it was safe and comfy, and I knew I could do the job. And the other one was for this web editor position at Cleveland's Alternative Weekly that I mentioned earlier. The hiring manager at the Alternative Weekly had set forth some incredibly lofty goals. And to be frank, I was doubting whether or not I could do the job. I remember thinking, what if I can't do it? What if I fail? At the ripe age of 22. I remember meeting with my college journalism professor to kind of talk through some various scenarios. And she asked me a very point blank question. When have I not risen to the occasion? And that question stopped me in my tracks, because she was absolutely right. If there was one thing I knew about myself, was that I could be the hardest worker in the room. I might not be the smartest person in the room. I might not be the most experienced, but I knew I could outwork anyone. And with that in mind, my professor told me to never make a decision based off of fear. And that day I accepted the job. So once I kind of established that work ethic and I realized I could do the job, I realized I had, the ability to work hard and achieve and excel. That's when I started thinking, basically what were my skills worth? What value do they have? And especially for young members of the workforce, women in particular. I think that it's super important to figure out their worth and then not be afraid to ask for it. So time and time again, I've seen young women accept a job offer on the spot. So, the hiring manager will say, hey, we'd love for you to come in. We would offer you X. And they say yes, right there in the office or on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of thinking through the job, thinking through the expectations, thinking through their unique qualifications, and coming up with a counter offer. And I think there are a few reasons why young people and women in particular tend to do this. One, I think it's an emotional response. We're excited. Somebody wants us. But we're also a little bit afraid to negotiate. There's the looming thought. What if they say no to me? What if they reject me? What if they think I'm greedy? And, accepting a first offer is safe. There's no more limbo. We know we can pay our rent. But passing up that small window of opportunity to negotiate is a direct contributor to the gendered pay gap that plagues America today. As women, we need to empower ourselves to take that risk, to know our worth, to ask for it. And as Sheryl Sandberg, the CEO of Facebook, says, we need to lean in.
Yes, definitely. We need to work hard, know your worth, and have no fear. Those are definitely resounding statements when it comes to women. The pay gap 100% does exist, I feel, at this point in time, because of the fact that we don't speak up. We don't make the effort to ask for what we're worth. And I myself was guilty of this. Started off charging pennies on the dollar and not being sure to position myself and my products in the right way. So I think those are really important pieces, and that's great, Elena. Work hard, know what you're worth, and don't have fear. Take the time to really think things through and ask for what it is you feel would work best for you. I think fear is something that holds a lot of people back. And having the recognition of when it's time to push through a fear can really help women as well. So I'd love for you to share with us a little bit more about what onlyinyourstate.com actually does. So we know that you have an abundance of writers. I believe you said 78 writers across the country and in several cities across the country. Tell us about onlyinyourstate.com. Who is it for? Who's it designed for?
Sure. So onlyinyourstate.com is one of the largest travel sites on the web today. As I mentioned, we have 50. We're in 50 states and recently expanded into 25 cities as well. We have boots on the ground with writers in every single state and also the cities that we're in. We gear our content primarily toward people who are currently living in each state and want to discover new things, new attractions to visit, restaurants to try, hikes to take. Our unofficial slogan is discover what's in your own backyard. And that's what we aim to do. We want to give residents the resources that they need to enjoy their states to the fullest. So I'm originally from Ohio. I grew up there, spent many years there, but it wasn't until I started working at Only in Your State did I realize just how much Ohio has to offer. So we have some of the quirkiest and most unique attractions in the country, and I had no idea. For example, we're home to the Dum Dum Lollipop Factory, and you can actually take a trolley tour through the plant and see how lollipops are made. I mean, how cool is that?
That is great.
So each of our states and each of our cities, they have their own designated Facebook page. So if someone was looking for us on Facebook, they'd search for Only in Ohio or Only in Texas, Only in Michigan. And across our network of pages, we have nearly 10 million Facebook fans. So these are all people who are super interested in travel. They want to discover something new. They want to share their state pride, and so they come to us for those exact things.
Nice.
Now, aside from creating content, we also launched a store recently, in the last few months, in fact, and this was really just to give our followers the chance to kind of wear their state pride on their sleeves, literally. We have a variety of different styles and merchandise on the store. Probably our best seller so far has been our Roots t-shirt, which is a very simple design. Our tees kind of have the state outline on them with tree roots kind of winding down, and then it simply just says Roots. It's very classy, sophisticated, and that's definitely been one of the hottest items that we've had since launching our store. So we are a startup company. We were founded in 2015. Since that time, coming up on 2.5, 3 years, we've grown tremendously. We started out with one state, one writer, and have really blossomed into this company with 78 employees, like I said, a pretty sizable Facebook presence, and now a store. So just in the 2.5 to 3 year span, we have really come quite a long way, and I think our journey is only just beginning.
Do you see it going further than just being U.S. based? In other words, only in...
We have talked about, we have talked about international expansion at some point. It's probably not in the immediate future, but, things change so quickly with our company.
Right.
We are always adapting, always testing new things. So, in 6 months, we could be having a very different conversation. We definitely could be, staying only in Australia or only in England. So, sky's the limit.
I was just going to say that definitely sounds like you could. I mean, you went from one state with one writer in 2015 to 78 writers in 2017. So I'm excited to hear the remainder of this journey of Only in Your State, rapidly growing. You as a listener are interested, we're going to definitely include a link to onlyinyourstate.com's homepage, but also to their store specifically, so you can check out that Roots t-shirt that Elena was just describing. I have had a chance to look at that, and I absolutely adore that. Definitely we'll put a link to that. Elena, I'd love to know, if you had a time machine and could go back, say, 5 to 7 years before you found onlyinyourstate.com, probably during your internships and traveling and so forth, if you could go back and tell yourself one thing, what do you think that one thing would be?
Probably would have to say, don't underestimate the power of your network. So I think young people in particular, especially those of us who've grown up behind computer screens and grown up using social media, tend to shy away a little bit from professional social situations. But for me personally, my network has been the number one way I've been able to move up over the years. For my last 2 jobs, I actually didn't even officially apply or anything, never submitted a resume or filled out an application. Rather, I was able to utilize my network to make the connections that I needed to create the opportunities that eventually turned into jobs for me. So one of my favorite ways to do this is with the good old-fashioned informational interview. So I love this tactic if you're ever looking for a job. Basically, you find people in your industry or even, at a place of business that you want to work, and just kind of reach out and ask them for, 10 to 15 minutes of their time to hear about their journey, to hear how they got their start, to hear how they're doing what they love every single day. And, most people kind of love to talk about themselves, especially to some young whippersnapper who's, eager to join in the industry. So they'll give you that 10 to 15 minutes. Usually it'll go over to like 30 or an hour. But just kind of creating, those meaningful connections like that, for me, that's been the most powerful way to really get your foot in the door. When I was starting out, I was moving to Cleveland, Ohio, and really didn't know pretty much anybody in the area. I had some family, but that was really it, no professional connections. So I was able to use my alumni database and find one professional connection that was relevant in my industry. And, I took him out for coffee, and at the end of the conversation, asked him very simply, do you have any other colleagues who would be interested in just chatting with me for a few minutes? And boy, that really blossomed. By the end of that, I think I had 5 or 10 different informational interviews lined up, and one, led to my first job and ended up being my direct supervisor at my first job. So, never underestimate the power of these connections. And I think that creating a powerful network doesn't necessarily mean you have to go out to networking events and, always be schmoozing or, whatnot. In my experience, nurturing a few meaningful connections is way more powerful than collecting 100 business cards at your city's next press club event. So being strategic about it, being deliberate, that to me has been the most successful way to really expand my network.
Strategic and deliberate actions of really developing connections, creating strategic opportunities to actually move forward. Creating that opportunity versus waiting for it is really what it sounds like. Definitely using your network is important, and it's something that I don't think people do often enough. This show is really designed to assist entrepreneurs with possibly coming up with a new business idea by solving an issue or, a need in an industry that they may not have realized to be. Because, of course, we'd love to know if, in fact, we had a magic wand that you could go ahead and just wave and change anything at all that you deal with on a day-to-day basis while, working with the writers and the content producers of Only in Your State. What would you change if you could change anything at all, and why?
So I would probably have to say that I would grant myself a crystal ball to peek into the minds of Facebook's finest and see what kinds of algorithm changes and new types of technology they're planning for 2018. So as a social publisher, all 78 of us are working remotely. We are incredibly interested and invested in any new initiatives that Facebook rolls out that could affect our readers, how they view our content, and also how we do our jobs on a day-to-day basis. So, for example, in the last 12 months alone, we've increased our multimedia presence, specifically video, as that's a really popular format right now on Facebook. Another thing we've done is that we've rolled out Facebook Instant articles for our mobile users, which makes the load time and overall user experience way better for our readers. So I would love to be able to anticipate, and I know the rest of the staff at Only in Your State would love to as well, anticipate what exactly Facebook has in store for us the next 1 to 5 years to really get a leg up on other publishers in the game. Facebook is constantly changing, and it's something that every social publisher kind of keeps their thumb on. We feel that, we've been affected by certain changes, but kind of have a pretty good handle on how to adapt and grow at the same time, with Facebook, so that we're giving our readers the best possible experience that we can each and every day. But just really getting a look at what they have in store would make, every one of our lives easier as we're creating content, creating video, creating original stories, and just kind of figuring out ways to maximize shareability and visibility for our content on a day-to-day basis.
That's awesome. And that's actually an amazing answer, because oftentimes it's really about the ability to increase advertising or awareness of a product. But I love the way you position that is really about making sure that it's the best possible experience for your readers. And that's really the sign of someone who truly cares about the clients, the customers, the interaction of the audience that you're having. So I love that answer. And if we can have someone create that crystal ball, that'd be awesome. However, I think something that would be slightly more logical is I'm totally going to tag Mark as we are publishing this episode, and we are going to reach out and see if there is any way, shape, or form that we can get a leg up on some of those, highly doubt it, but we'll see what we can do. We'll see what we can do, Elena. I would love it if we could. I have yet to get Mark on the show, but we'll definitely see what we can do, because I think that is something that, as marketers, we would all love to have some insight into. So good one there. Elena, you've been absolutely wonderful. Please share the best way for our listeners to find you.
So our website is onlyinyourstate.com, and then personally, I'm always reachable through LinkedIn. Again, Elena Newtile, and you can find me there.
Awesome. Well, Elena, thank you for joining us once again. We truly appreciate you sharing your time and expertise with the community. You've been outstanding.
Thank you so much, Lori. Really appreciate it.
Elena, thank you once again for joining us here for this very first episode of 2018. We truly appreciate you taking the time to share your journey and your expertise with the community. Techie community, how well do you know your state? To find hidden treasures and adventures that exist only in your backyard, check out onlyinyourstate.com. You can always reach Elena through our show notes page at technology-equality.com/Elena Newtile. Thank you once again, everyone, for joining us here for episode 74 as we continue to highlight females who have taken on upper management or the entrepreneurial journey. Don't forget to click the subscribe link so you don't miss a thing. And until our next episode, as we continue to hear the journey, find the pain, and create solutions.